defended my dissertation last week, so that's changed. I'm happy to not be a candidate.
Any word?
I'm done. The other thing is I presented at the University of South Carolina not that long ago at the end of the day on women's softball, and I had 2 people in the room, so I'm so happy to have a bigger crowd today. So thank you for coming here. My subject of my dissertation was handedness in women's softball. Just some terms. Handedness is a term we take for granted. You know, we say that we throw right-handed, we bat right-handed. The scientific term would be laterality. Really, it's a if you're saying bat, you don't really bat right-handed. It's a two-handed action or a bimanual action. So there's laterality, which is manual laterality of throwing. It's one hand. Bimanual is 2 hands. But I'm going to use handedness. It's what we're all familiar with. It's the term that we all use. We know what a right-handed batter is. The significance of my dissertation, gender is a big issue. Gender in studies, scientific studies, females are underrepresented. If you took a look at the agenda here, most studies are male based. The research shows about under 40% typically for women compared to men in athletic journals as far as research individuals. That's who the sample is. It's about 40%. It's about the same in laterality research. I found it was difficult to find as much data on handedness for women as it was for men, and there was no research on fast pitch softball as far as handedness until my study. This is a quote that I like. It's from Allison McCann on Nate Silver's website, an article she wrote for 538. And she wrote, while you can easily look up all 14 million at-bats in the history of Major League Baseball, I have no idea how many at-bats were taken during the 5 years of women's professional softball. That league folded along with any of the data it recorded, presumably, and now the new National Pro Fast Pitch League has archives that only go back to 2004, and it appears they haven't been updated since 2009. This is still the case. She went on in that article to say, if you take a look at golf, the PGA has over 100 stats measuring golfers. The LPGA has about 10 per golfer. So this is pretty consistent that there's a difference between men's sports and women's sports as far as analysis goes. As far as laterality, this was a study just published in 2017 by Dr. Nate Loffing, who's one of the leaders in handedness research in sports. And he was taking a look at the effect that time has on handedness in a sport, that the less time that you have to react, does it affect, or more time, does it affect the rate of handedness in the sport? And you can see you have male competition, and he has his different sports, but he can't draw a conclusion for women, because women, he doesn't have data for baseball or for cricket, which is pitchers versus bowlers. So I did reach out to him and say, I hope that I can provide you with that data so you can complete your findings, but it's a problem in that women aren't as studied as much as men. So I wanted to base my research or my dissertation, really this was one of the seminal studies. This was back in 1999, and this is by Grondin et al., who looked at the effect that being right or left-handed thrower had on a right or left-handed batter. You can see we have bats right, throws right, bats left, throws right, bats left, throws left. There are no bats right, throw left because there are so few. And what they found was that there are performance differences based upon what hand you're throwing with and what hand you're batting with. Now, I would like to reinvestigate this study since I think there's some other causes, but their theory was that it did matter what handed you were. In women's softball, so my findings, I found that about 9.35% of my data set, they were left-handed. This was from 2015 to 2017 in the Power 5 and Group of 5 conferences. So that's the top 104 softball conferences, or softball teams, sorry, typically in Division I softball. That rate is slightly higher than the national average, which is around 8%. And you can understand if there's some type of advantage to being left-handed in this sport, that you would have a higher percentage of left-handers in the sport. In women's softball, this number jumps to left-sided batters to over 31%. The reason for that is in women's softball you got slappers. And slappers were a big problem in my study. I'll show you why that is, or exactly what a slapper is. But you can see how many individuals, we went from 9% throw left-sided, but all of those individuals are being switched over to batting left-sided, 31%. More than likely, it's at the youth level, if you have a fast player who's right-handed, you're going to switch him to being a left-sided batter. And then there's very few switch hitters in women's softball, under 0.5% at the highest level. Now then, comparing the Grondin findings as far as men's professional baseball to women's softball, you can see there's more male left-sided batters and throwers, 12% compared to just under 8%. But the big switch in women's softball is that jump who bat left and throw right, and that's likely the slappers. They actually outnumber the professional baseball players. And then the other thing that's interesting, again, we have that small percentage who bat right and throw left, but how few switch hitters there are in college softball. There's under 0.5%, and you can see in Major League Baseball there's just over 7%. So a large number of switch hitters in professional baseball compared to women's softball. So as far as my dissertation, I had a problem, and you can see it in, for example, in this slide with home run percentage. You can see how it's skewed over here, and my theory was that it was slap hitters who were skewing my data. A slap hitter is somebody who's going to put the ball on the ground. They're going to beat it out. They're going to use their speed. They're already moving through the box. They're not trying to hit home runs. So this is home run percentage. So you can understand why I'd have a large number of individuals skewed over there, because they don't hit home runs. If they do, it's almost an accident that they're legging out an inside the park home run, because their goal is to put the ball on the ground. And I have an example, if you're not familiar with women's softball, what a slap hitter is. So you can see when executed properly, basically you're going and picking up the ball and handing it back to your pitcher. And this is something unique to women's softball. Just going through it again, she's already moving through the box at contact. So she's left-sided, and so her momentum on the swing is going to take her to first base. But she's moving on contact, something you don't see in baseball. And so there she's slapping it on the left side of the infield, no chance for a play. Here's the other weapon in the arsenal of slap hitters is the bunt. Again, she's going to show late. The ball's already on the way. She's moving through the box, and she's off to first base, and then she just goes and picks it up. When executed properly, it's incredibly tough to defend. It puts a lot of pressure on a defense. So I coached while I was doing my comps. I coached for 2 years as an assistant out at the Claremont Colleges in California, Claremont, California, for Claremont-Mudd-Scripps Colleges. And it's a very successful women's softball program at the D3 level. And we had a player who was a D1 talent and a slapper, but she went to Claremont McKenna because she wanted to go to a high academic school, and it certainly is. So what I did here was just to give you an idea of the pressure that slappers put on a defense in women's college softball. This is going to be Tara, who's a very fast D3 player. And over here is Byron Buxton, who's probably the fastest baseball player. In fact, last year he was the fastest going first to second. And I sync them at contact here. So it gives you an idea. Tara is slid into second base, and I'm not saying Byron's slow. Obviously, the infield is smaller, all right? She's not going to beat him in a race. But when you think of the scale, if just the games are so similar, if we can go back once more, I'll play that one more time. But you can see how much farther ahead Tara is coming into second. She's on the base, and Byron's just getting to the base. Now, covered StatCast, it provides all these amazing statistics. This was the fastest home to second in 2017. He went from home to second in 7.12 seconds, covered 30.8 feet per second, incredibly fast. And then using Huddle, which I had in the outfield, she went 5.93 seconds just on a random day in April to second base on a double. So you can see how they affect the game and then how they affected my dissertation. So this was Tara, typical economics accounting major for Claremont-McKenna. Nice job waiting for her. But using her as my basis for what a slap hitter, the ideal slap hitter is. Typically, they have a lot of hits, a lot of singles. You can see she had 244 singles over the course of a 4-year career. Not many extra base hits, 14, 3, and 2. So again, they're putting the ball on the ground and they're going to leg it out. And then she had a high number of stolen bases, 88 in 182 games, so better than 1 every 2 games. So using this on my data set, and this is taking my dissertation one step further for this conference, I wanted to see, does this translate to Division I, which is where the data that I'm studying, those 105 teams. And so I used some characteristics of Tara. So I wanted to see players who play. They have over 75 at-bats in a season. They're going to hit 1.33. They're going to have singles per game, so they're going to have a high number of singles. They're going to ground out a lot. The NCAA provides ground out, fly out stats. So they're going to ground out more than they fly out because that's what they're trying to do, is put the ball on the ground. And then they're going to have a high number of stolen bases. And this came back with 2 players at the Division I level. So 2 slappers, Carly Wester from Notre Dame and Courtney Emanuel from Georgia. 2 great slappers. So I felt like I was on to something here. And so using percentiles of different categories that I felt I could identify slappers. So slugging percentage, they're going to have a lower slugging percentage because, again, they're putting the ball on the ground. Going to have a higher number of singles, high number of stolen bases, high number of ground outs. I was able to identify 327 left-handed players, left-sided batters, and over 485 individual seasons. And not trying to be a creeper, but at the Division III level, you don't have information. You have to go find it yourself. If you read the book, the only rule is it has to work. It's the same thing. You have to go find your data. And so I got pretty good as far as scouting. So I took at Division III, so I took a sample of 20 players from my data set that had identified as possible slappers. And I found that 17 of the 20 that I went out and looked for were I could identify as slappers, either through text, their recruiting videos, still pictures, whatever it is. So I felt like I was onto something here as far as creating a formula to identify slappers, because the NCAA doesn't tell me who slappers are. So using WOBA, which we just talked about as our metric, I took a look at my data set for those who bat left, throw right, bat left, throw left, bat right, throw right, and then slappers, who I think are slappers in my data set. And what I found was, running an ANOVA and then a post hoc test, was that this group here, so I'd say that these are swingers, were statistically significantly better than right-handed batters who throw right. And then I've got the slappers here. Now my fear for this exercise was that all I'd done was I'd cut off a group of the lefties and put them down here as slappers, so I took it one step further. And I took a look, I ran that same thing for right-handers. So I categorized them as right-sided batters who throw right and they're weak hitters. And again, it was the same thing. Really, my findings didn't change. I still have the left-handed swingers, those who I don't think are slappers. In other words, they're significantly statistically better then the righties who throw right, and then I've got the slappers down here in WOBA, and then I've got the weak righties. So, if as a coach, what that means to me is I want left-sided batters who can swing the bat. Now, it could be that it's just strategic advantage hypothesis that because they're so rare in the sport that it's not something intrinsically to do with left-sided batters. It's not that they're better at sports than right-sided batters. It's just they're so rare in the sport that they have a performance advantage. At least that would be my theory. Any questions or comments?
Do you use the Major League Baseball weights?
No, I calculated my own weights. Yep.
And were they much different?
They're going to be different, yeah. I guess I didn't compare them to what they are for Major League Baseball, but just like Major League Baseball, they vary by season. So. Okay.
Were you lobbying against slappers then? Is that what I'm trying to follow?
Okay, so there's a role for slappers. Role is to get on base. But back in the 1980s, slappers were in their heyday. Slappers have disappeared in softball.
Ty Cobb might agree with you too.
Oh yes, exactly.
Pete Rose.
Yes, yes. It's tough to measure. The NCAA doesn't tell me who slappers are. You know, they don't put in the roster, hey, this person's a slapper. So it's tough to measure how that's. It appears that they've become less common in the game. The reason for that is more than likely is the run scoring environment has gone up. Much like in baseball, when the run scoring is low, you can play a small ball game. But when the run scoring is high, you need to hit a lot of home runs. You need to score a lot of runs. You can't give up outs. You can't be bunting. You know, those types of things. And actually, if you scale it, there's more runs scored in women's softball than Major League Baseball. And we know runs are up in Major League Baseball since it's 7 innings versus 9. And actually, if they were just equal, it's about the same. So yeah, so slappers have a role. Getting on base, how you would develop a lineups sabermetrically or analytically would be that they're going to hit probably in that first spot or maybe the ninth spot.
Are the youth programs mitigating against that by cultivating slappers?
That's a good question. I would say more kids are probably swinging away than they were. Has it filtered down that low? I don't know. If you have a fast kid, you're still going to switch them over to be more than likely a slap hitter. But back in the 80s, again, Arizona had a lineup full of slap hitters, and you don't see that anymore. I mean, it's disappeared from the game. But they had Jenny Finch pitching as well.
Has the defense gotten better? The gloves are better?
I would say all of the things, training methods, those things have had an impact on women's softball as well. Yeah.
I've been wondering about why slappers have been in softball and not in baseball, other than Ichiro. I can't think of anybody who.
Right. Maybe
is it the ball's bigger, so you can.
Is it, like a Luis Polonia? I think he's one that I could think of. Maybe that was trying to slap the ball on the left side. Is it pride? You think of players still try to hit through the shift, and when they could just put the ball on the left side. So ego has, I believe, a lot to do with it. This is something that's accepted in the women's game. In the men's game, I don't know, you want to be like J.D. Martinez and hit home runs, the fly ball revolution. So, okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks very much.